On the right hand side, you can see the slide of my grandfather, Muhammad Gama. His actual name was just Muhammad. Gama was the great grandfather's name. But as we now, in our tradition, our custom, we name sons after their fathers, like in Arabic, say Muhammad bin Gama or Muhammad son of Gama, or it'd be something like that. And my name would be probably Asif Shakoor, no, Asif Walid, Muhammad Abdul Shakur, something like that, son of Abdul Shakur.
So back in Pakistan, you discovered this. Well, you were given this wooden box, which I think in previous conversation you said you weren't that interested in. But once you opened it, you discovered a whole load of documents, and there's a lot of them. We're just going to share one of them with everybody today. So yes. What is it about this document, and what was the story that goes?
The interesting thing is that this box, my grandmother actually never let anyone touch, and my mother tried to once touch it, and she prohibited my grandma. My grandma prohibited my mother from touching this box. And later on, it was a lot later that when I went to Pakistan and researched for this box, but I'll come to that point. This document, is a letter that my grandmother wrote to the Ministry of Social Security, the overseas group in Newcastle, as part of her pension claim. And she mentions in this letter something like, I'll just read out the important sentence, perhaps, if that helps. She mentioned in here something about, if I perhaps read the entire letter, it's very short. With due respect and humble submission, I beg to request that I have submitted an application dated 27/6/1966, and then 8th of August 1966. But up to this time, I have not received any reply. I'm a widow and have no means of livelihood, and anxious for action on my mercy petition. My husband served during the war, 1914-1918, in Merchant Navy. I could produce the war medals if and when required. My late husband served Midland Cylinder Company, which means Birmingham Motor Cylinder Company, and Acquisition Pollock Limited and Paddock Works in Oldbury. So it was a letter that she wrote, and there was quite a few letters that the Ministry of Social Security, which we've not put in today's slides, which they wrote back confirming that they had received the medals, and then another letter following that confirming they had sent the medals back to Pakistan.
So before you saw this letter, you had no idea that your grandfather had been in the Merchant Navy during the First World War. You had no idea that he had been given any medals for his service in the Merchant Navy during the First World War. That's right? That's
correct. I had no idea prior to this that my grandfather had service in the Merchant Navy. It was just this box that because we had our whole house, the maintenance work done, we had it demolished and rebuilt, and my grand uncles had dumped all my grandmother's belongings into my grand uncle's garden, and my grand aunt, my grand uncle was saying to me that if there's anything you might like, take it. You might wish to keep her staff, her walking stick, as a memory. And my mum was on about a wooden box that she had, and she never let us touch it. Look for this box, because she said she had some important papers in there. And I searched for this box, and I had to tell my mum that it's all, literally. If I should say this, but I thought it was all rubbish and not nice to look at. And I thought just the right way. And my mum kept insisting to find this box, and I found this box. And there's a whole lot of papers that come in this box. They were really old papers, really faded away and in really bad condition. And at the time, I didn't think much of it. I told my mum, here's the box, and I just left it and I went. And then later on, I came back and I thought, let me have a look at what papers, just to find out what was she like, what the sort of papers did she keep, what's so important about these papers. And then I came across a set of papers which I read about war service and war medals. What's this about? That's when I took them away overnight, and I spent almost 3 or 4 hours during the night till 4 a.m. sort of studying these papers. And at that time, I didn't even have a full understanding of what the word Mercantile Marine meant. So I was trying to understand, and I was trying to research overnight, and that's how the story progressed.
And that is, as you say, an amazing story. And there were many papers, and we're not going to be able to talk about them all now. But the mystery was that there were no war medals. And you're going to talk a little bit more about the medals themselves later on this afternoon. But this set you on a journey to try and find out, while you were trying to find the war medals, to try and find out more about your grandfather who you'd never met. I think you found out that, I mean, it was a global story. It involved research in the UK and in North America and elsewhere. And you found out about his service on various ships, including on this one. Can you tell us something about this, about his on ships?
Yeah, that's right, Georgie. This was basically a vessel called the SS Kiva. It was a vessel that was owned by the Peninsula and Oriental Steam Navigation Company. And this was one of the vessels that my grandfather served on, having found him on crew list, which I'll come to. And this was the vessel that he arrived at the Royal Victoria Docks. And I'll come back to that as well later on, perhaps.
Right. Okay. And I think you said you found pictures of the other ships that he was on, and an indication that he docked in London possibly as far back as 1915, I think, when he would have been only about 20.
Yeah, I found, I didn't find his original continuous discharge certificate. In fact, I found another seafarer's discharge certificate called Roma Hassa. His original certificate was found from my grandmother's belongings and probably is one of the only ones that survives in the UK. But I traced my grandfather through crew lists to find out what vessels he was on, and I found three. One of these was the SS Multan, one was the SS Medina, and in 1913 he arrived at the SS Multan, which was again a P&O vessel. He arrived on that in London, and on the SS Medina again he arrived at that in London at Tilbury Docks. But I don't know if he came on those vessels to the Royal Victoria Docks in Newham. But so this slide, shall I just begin on this slide? Or?
Yeah. Talk about the significance of this one.
Yeah, this basically, this is a crew list that you could see for the Indian crew, and it's for the SS Kiva, and it was dated the 21st of January 1918 when they arrived in New York and had departed from London. And this is the interesting crew list because this is the one that's for the voyage that my grandfather stayed in London at the Royal Victoria Docks for a month while the Kiva was refitted. And you can see my grandfather's name, under the cursor, which Georgie just kindly moving around. It says Mohammed Gama. You could see his name was anglicised. Mohammed, we wouldn't spell Mohammed like that. It was spelled, they anglicised the spell as Mahommed. Yeah, I got additional information such as his age at the time was sure as 23. His height is 5'8", but I knew he was 6 foot because he was taller than my dad.
So he's listed here, and I don't know whether there's people who are looking at this who are looking at some of the other names and thinking, oh, did I have anybody with that name in my family? That would be amazing if that was the case on any of these of the crew lists that we're sharing. But so this is showing that it arrived in New York and it came from London. But you found another document. This one I think you found in the US in the Ellis Islands archives.
That's right, in the Ellis Island.
Luckily online, and then this following document you found in the National Archives in the UK. And what's significant about this one?
It's a good question, Georgie. What's significant is that this document wouldn't contain the names of Indian seamen that served on the Kiva. But the interesting thing is that this is the logbook, that my grandfather would have been on this vessel at the time. And this was interesting thing is that this document shows that that they sailed from Bombay and arrived to London carrying mails and passenger cargoes. And it shows at the bottom, perhaps I've got a lot of comments coming up, which is distracting my screen, but it shows, sorry, perhaps I should, give me a second, please. It shows that they arrived in London on the 8th of December, 1917. And it shows that at the port of London, and then it was unusual for a commander of the vessel to perhaps note the docks that they docked at. But in this case, I'm very lucky here that the actual Harry William Potter, the commander of the SS Kiva, has actually kindly noted the Victoria Docks under there. If you can see, it says Victoria DKS, short for docks. So that's the Royal Victoria Docks in Newham today.
So was quite unusual, you said, for them to actually write the names of the particular docks that they were at. But that's your proof, together with the crew lists, that your grandfather docked in Newham at Royal Victoria Docks at least once amongst his many journeys during the First World War. So just moving on, I know that that sort of led to your speculation, thinking about, okay, he was in the docks for a month, it would have been. What did he do when he was in the area? And there's a few slides here, I think, that you're going to talk through about the area at the time from the perspective of a South Asian seafarer.
Thank you, Georgie. This is a slide that shows a map. It's been taken from a map book, and the 2 pages have been put together using archival tape, but it's actually a map from 1910, and it shows what the Royal Victoria Docks, perhaps what they looked like back then, what the area was like back then. So it's a lot different from what it was now. It's just interesting to know what the area was like, and back when my grandfather probably arrived in 1917, so it's like a 7 or 8 year gap, the time he arrived and the time this map was published.
And so this is just a couple of other examples, I think, that you wanted to share with people where you saw evidence on the crew lists of your grandfather's
That's right.
presence. So do you want to say something about this one?
Thanks, Georgie. That's basically these two are two. This is just another crew list, which was for the voyage of the 14th of May 1918. Again, they left London and they arrived in New York, and it shows my grandfather's name on line number 8. And again, it shows his position on the ship as fireman, and it shows the time he engaged was 18th of October 1917 in Bombay. And again, it shows his age, 23, and it shows male, and it says East Indian. That's quite strange, because I thought he would have been, I'm a Pakistani, perhaps I thought he would have been known as Pakistani, but Pakistan didn't exist then. So he's put his ethnicity, he's put down his race as East Indian and British East Indian, and again his height. And it's interesting to see this. This slide's for, again, because my grandfather made 4 voyages from New York to London. And one of this again on the 8th of July, which again, because the right handwriting's a bit terrible on this, I can't actually read it. If I go to it, I'll come back to that. But this was another one he made on the 8th of July. And basically what they were doing was transporting troops from American troops from New York for the onward journey to the UK, to make the onward journey cross-channel to France as part of the war effort.
Right, and then so we'll come back to that. But yes, coming back to the docks, then you, I know, have done quite a lot of research, and we were planning a walk around the docks to try and find these sites, which I do because of the lockdown. But yeah, you've been doing some research about places that he might have known about or visited at the time.
These are slides for the Seaman's Hospital in Newham, just by the docks, and on the right hand side, you can see on the right hand side, the high side of the screen, you can see the Seaman's Hospital, a foundation stone that was laid in 1889, July 1889, if I'm correct. And then on the left, you've got the foundation stone for the new Seaman's Hospital. So basically, the Seaman's Hospital was demolished in 1937. I think so the building was subsiding, so it was demolished, and then it was relocated to just off Prince Regent Lane, and that's where you can see on the left the plaque, the new foundation stone for the new Seaman's Hospital. And the old one was located on Connaught, just off Connaught Road, and me and Georgie sort of went down to see the area where it would have been, and it was interesting. We were planning to do this part of our walk, show where the old Seaman's Hospital was and where the new one was. So it's interesting because on here you find that many Indian seafarers from India, or present-day Pakistan and Bangladesh, would have stayed at these Seaman's Hospitals, and I'll come back to this later on, perhaps.
Okay, so yes, so this is something amazing that you again found in the United States. Can you say a bit about finding this image?
It's interesting because this is from an image taken from the new Seaman's Hospital. And I come to what Georgie asked about earlier, is how I found this image. I was actually just searching for Seaman at that state at the Seaman's Hospital, and I came across a website called Historic Images. And this is a business based in the United States of America. And I came across this image of a seaman during the Second World War at the Seaman's Hospital. And if you look in the far in the background, you can actually see the funnels of the ships, perhaps, and even the cranes at the docks. And we could see a nurse in the image looking at the seaman. And from the tone of the seaman that's on the hospital bed, I figured out it's got to be an Indian seaman, although there was no mention in the caption about him being in Alaska or an Indian seaman. Should I just read the plate out, perhaps in the back?
Yes, please.
It reads something like, "The New Albert Dock Hospital, London, rides at anchor like a trim ship. It is the merchant seaman's own hospital. With the tang of the sea and the skyline of ship funnels, a patient takes the sun. After his fractured leg has set in a few days, he'll be up and about again." So this was published on the 17th of April 1944 in the American newspaper, and it was from Newham in London. So it's interesting.
Sorry to interrupt. I just have a question that's come in on chat, which is relevant now. Bose asked if the Seaman's Hospital that was built in 1937 is still standing.
That's a very good question. It's a very good question. I think partially it still stands. I think some of the buildings have become a new nursing home, but it was demolished, and the only thing that does survive there is a wall, which was the gate for the new Seaman's Hospital. And there's two sides of the gate, and the wall on two sides. One side of the wall was actually hit by a car, so it disappeared due to an accident. And the one side that does survive is the side that has these two foundation stones. One's from 1889, and one's from 1937. So it's interesting.
It's on Alnwick Road, ALNWICK Road, I think. So going back to the hospital, and actually it's appropriate to be on this slide because you also found an amazing, you tracked down somebody who died there in 1901. Can you tell us a bit more about him?
It's good you reminded me, Georgie. I came across someone by the name of Abdul Rahman, spelled ABDULRAHMAN, and he died at the Seaman's Hospital. And I looked into him, and I came across that he was buried at the West Ham Cemetery in Newham. And I sort of paid a visit there, and I spoke to one of the staff there, and I looked at who showed me the register of seamen, the people that buried in the ground, and she took me to show me his grave, and he's actually buried in an unmarked public grave, and he said probably have several more people buried on top of him, and there's no gravestone to mark that he's actually buried there. And it's really interesting because I discovered that there was something like, she sort of suggested you can have a memorial built on his grave if you want, just to mark that the site he's buried at. And it's interesting because the reason why I didn't have a memorial built is because a plaque or a stone made as such, because I discovered there's something like three other dozens of seamen, 30 or 40 sort of buried there. So it wouldn't be fair just to honor one. But going back to Abdul Rahman, when I looked at the register, I discovered that his address was shown as, his last place of residence and address was shown as the Seaman's Hospital, which was the old one. And I've got a picture here, actually, if I just quickly show it up. I don't know if you should be able to see it, but I don't think you can, perhaps. It's actually an image from 1912, published in the Illustrated London News, and it shows the old Seaman's Hospital. And that's where he happened to stay and happened to have died, and he was buried, later rested, unconsecrated, at West Ham Cemetery.
And just remembering him and the other people, you mentioned when I was chatting to you the other day that it is possible to ask to have a look in the register at that cemetery to find out the names of the other Asian seafarers who died there, who were buried there. Is that right?
That's right, Georgie. It's a good idea for anyone researching their seafarer ancestors from BAME background or even non-BAME background. I know there's going to be loads of people that live in Newham that are probably Chinese, Bangladeshi, Pakistani, Indian, or even African that have ancestors that served in the British Merchant Navy or the Mercantile Marine. And I just really recommend that you go and try, and perhaps even if you go to the cemetery, they would. I mean, I was a lay person and I wasn't anyone special, but they let me see the record for a seafarer that I want to know, learn about a bit more.
Thank you. So just moving on. I've forgotten about this one. So yeah, because in your research you went through many archives and you came across many unexpected pictures of South Asian seafarers. So could you say a little bit about this image that you found?
Yeah. This image is quite interesting because it's taken from the Illustrated London News, and it was in relation to the strikes in London, and it says at the heading at the top, "Saving London from starvation, importing food." So it shows Asian or Indian seamen, helping unload packages off a ship, and as you could see a large wooden container, and they seem like to me the seamen in this image seemed like to me they were Indian or Bangladeshi, probably most likely. And you could see about 8 of them, 2 in the background far, and they're carrying a large box. So it's interesting because it did say something else about this as well. Perhaps if I can't actually.
We've lost you.
So I'll leave it there because I can't actually find it.
Don't worry. Don't worry. Anyway, because we need to move on to the next stage of the story. So having looked at the other places around the docks, and I think you also mentioned the work of Rosina Visram, that she's done a lot of work into researching other places set up by missionary societies, etc., for Black and Asian seafarers around the docks. But you also became very interested in what was life like on board the ships and about the other people on the lists. And one of the people who you interestingly found out about, who has actually written, was Amir Hyder Khan, and I think he's down here at the bottom of this crew list, which was the same one that we showed, the first crew list that we showed with your grandfather's name on the Kiva arriving in New York on the 21st of January 1918. You found the name of this man as well. So yes, tell us a little bit about the significance of Amir Hyder Khan.
It's really important, interesting as well, because I actually wrote an article for the University of Portsmouth, an organisation called Port Towns and Urban Cultures, based at the University of Portsmouth. And I had Naina, an academic, who came back to me and mentioned something about Dada Ahmed Hyder Khan, that he was on the same ship as your grandfather. And I had come across something about it before in a book called Bengali Harlem. I don't know, I've got the book somewhere, but I can't find it, so I'm not going for it now. But Ahmed Hyder Khan, interesting story about him is that his name occurred on the Kiva, the crew list of the Kiva. And you could say that his name was anglicized as well. He often used the name, he was famously known as, in later life, as Dada Ahmed Hyder Khan. Dada is actually not a name, Dada just means a grandfather in Urdu or Hindi, it means grandfather. So, or grandparent. So Ahmed Hyder Khan his name is put down as Ahmed Hyder Atta Muhammad. But actually, it was just Ahmed Hyder, not Atta Muhammad. So it's because you put his name was Ahmed Hyder, son of Atta Muhammad, and in his autobiography, he mentions that Atta Muhammad was his father. So you saying a lot of names, like my grandfather's name would have been Muhammad Gama, was actually Muhammad Walid Gama, meaning Muhammad, son of Gama. But Walid doesn't actually mean anything. Sorry, it does mean something, but it's not actually a name. It means just a father or son of, like you say in Arabic, Ibn and Bin, and so forth. And sorry, I just quickly mention about this as well. I don't know how we're doing for time as well, because I got this.
It's fine. Just tell us a little bit about what he wrote about being on board.
Yeah, it was interesting knowing about him because Ahmed Hyder Khan narrates in his memoir. What you can see, the picture on the left is the first volume, volume 1, and his memoir was published a long while ago, and it was out of print. It was republished by the University of Karachi, the Pakistan Study Centre at the University of Karachi in 2007, I guess. And in this particular volume, he mentions about when the key was stopped at the Royal Victoria Docks and stayed there for a month. And he describes his memory of that the key was stayed there until it was refitted with cannons and flagging to go on the next journey to transport American troops. And he says during that period, he goes that he stayed here in London for a month, and he had a friend because he had been serving on the ships before. So he had a friend he went to meet in London. He came off the ship, he went into London, went to see the factory where his friend that worked there. And I think I'm not sure if this is correct, but I think he mentioned he stayed there at the factory for a few days. And then he says that what he done in London. So I presume that my grandfather probably would have got off as well, but wouldn't know for definite where he might have gone.
Yeah, I mean, really interesting to get more of an insight because there's so few written records from the men who were working below decks on these ships, which brings us on to the search for the medals. So all of this time you were searching the archives, you were actually trying to track down your grandfather's missing First World War medals. You were writing to dealers and using social media. So can you tell us a bit about the location and managing or not managing to track down these two medals?
It's interesting, Georgie, because I came across what my grandfather would have received is the British War Medal, which is a slide you can see at the presently, and it was engraved with his name. 2,000 or so of these medals were given out to Indian seafarers, and the difference is because you could tell the difference because they was made out for Indian seafarers. They were made out of steel. For non-Indian seafarers, they were made. I mean, for BAME seafarers, should I say, made out of steel, and perhaps for non-BAME, they were made out of silver. And this was the British War Medal which he would have received. It was engraved with his name as Mohammed Gama, and then he would have received the Mercantile Marine War Medal as well, which again was made out of bronze, which was the same material used for a non-BAME seafarer as well. The interesting thing is that my grandfather's medal, the British War Medal, was actually I couldn't find it. I was sort of getting really frustrated, and I wrote something like addresses out of 200 envelopes and I was about to post them out, to various dealers, auctioneers, collectors, to see if I could find the medal. But I thought it was going to awfully cost a lot of money on stamp costs and postage. So then I decided that I won't post these letters out, and I'll just do one more last search. And I happened to do one final search, and I came across a site called www.coinsale.co.uk, and it was run by a medal dealer who's got 25 years experience based in Devon. And it was Jim Strawbridge. I don't know if Jim's listening to today, but Jim kindly returned me the medal, and he actually wrote me a letter as well. When he returned it to me, it was probably the best Christmas present to have. And I still got his letter, but I won't read his letter out. The second medal was the Mercantile Marine War Medal, which my grandfather would have received. I discovered that this was auctioned. It was sold by an auctioneer called E-Medals, and you can see their logo at the bottom of that image on the right hand side. It was sold by E-Medals. I couldn't find out where much more because they're not allowed to give out too much details who they sold it to, but it was sold to someone in 2016 in India, a buyer in India. That's all I know. And you can see my grandfather's name is MAHD, and it's got a dot which indicates it's been shortened, it's abbreviated from Mohammed, and then again Gama.
Fantastic. And do you have any of the medals with you today?
Yes, I do. I do actually have. It's good you said that to me. I actually have the medal here. I don't know if you can see it.
Just hold it up.
Yeah, I've put it inside this baked beans tin, but it's actually not a baked beans tin. It's actually a safe. I've put it in there since last night to keep it safe for today's talk. I'll just quickly show the medal. It's the British War Medal, which is the one I've got over here. And that was the original medal that was given to my grandfather. And I had this checked by Marcus Budgeon, who's a medal specialist at Spinks of London.
That's an amazing story that you tracked it down from the wooden box and the missing medal. It must be amazing to have that with you now. But I know that we're running out of time, and we we just want to go through the last few set of slides, which is about your own interest in, through doing this, you've come across images of other seafarers from other backgrounds with other stories, and I'm very keen to encourage other people to follow similar research journeys as you. So just going to go through the next few slides for you to describe a little bit about them and how you found these, and whether, hopefully they might lead to other people wanting to do further research as you have done.
This was basically a press photograph that I purchased from Historic Images, and it shows a sarang, what was known as the head of the Indian crew. Sarang literally came from the word sar, which means head in the Urdu language, and it shows a Calcutta man, a man from Calcutta, who was on board the SS City of Birmingham, the steamship. And this is the British steamship SS City of Birmingham, because there was some that was owned by, there's another SS City of Birmingham, so that was owned by this American shipping company. But this was published in the Boston Herald on the 31st December 1933, and it says that he was the head of the Indian crew, and they would take orders from him, and most Indian crew couldn't speak English, and he was able to speak quite a bit of English.
And the frustrating thing about this is we have his photo, what ship he was on, but no indication of his name, but that he was recruited from Calcutta. Okay, so yes, the next one.
The next one is from, again, from Historic Images of the United States that I purchased. It says these four men, members of the Lascars race from India, Bengal, subjects of the British Empire, were sailors aboard the SS Elmbank, a British boat which was torpedoed by a German submarine about 100 miles off the coast of Ireland in the North Atlantic. They were rescued by the SS Pikeport, taken to Vancouver, and then brought to New York aboard the SS Fort Townsend. It is believed they are being returned to India, and this was published in a newspaper in America on the 10th of October 1940. And it's interesting because you can see four men, two of them have beards, and what they seem like to me is Bangladeshi seafarers. And Georgie kindly pointed out to me that they're wearing some American attire.
Surely these men, when they returned to either Calcutta or present-day Bangladesh, they would have told their families about what happened to them when they were torpedoes and taken to the US and sent back to India afterwards. And maybe they've never seen this photo. So if there's anybody who has, recognized any of these people or have heard any of these kinds of stories, this photo has been hidden away for a long time. Okay, so Somali seafarers. Asif, you said you've got a story to tell about Ali Abdullah, who you also found on the crew list.
That's right. It was interesting because there was more than just Asian seafarers or South Asian seafarers, sorry, on these various vessels that served Britain. You find that there was someone I came across by the name of Abdullah Ali, and he was quite a young person, and he happened to die during the journey from London to New York when they had stayed at London for a month at the Royal Victoria Docks. When the Kiva left, and Amir Hyder Khan describes when it made his way out Dover and sailed to New York, and then on the crew list I found out that Abdullah Ali, you could see on line 24, sorry 28 is it? His name is a line put through his name and it says that he died, and he was age 24, and he was a Somali seafarer. And what it says on the crew list is that Harold William Potter, the commander of the ship, put down next to his name Black African, which indicates that he was probably Somali from somewhere in Africa. And there's many Somali seafarers that served. I came across another picture which I haven't got today with me, but I've got it somewhere else. I couldn't find it this morning actually. And on that image, it mentions Ahmad ibn Hassan, who was an African seafarer serving on a British vessel. And that image was published inside the British press.
And there are, if people are interested in looking as well, it's worth looking on various web pages like the one here, which is about Ibrahim Ismail, who wrote an autobiography in 1928. So if anybody is interested in following up his story, the link for that is here, our migration story. Okay, and Chinese merchant seamen as well.
It's interesting about Chinese because I came across many crew lists, and I was looking at the United States, kept at the National Archives in Washington, and they're available, some of them on the Ellis Island. And I was looking at huge lists as Chinese who had boarded in Bombay, was put down as Lascar or Indian seafarers. And this on the left hand side, what you can see is a picture published in a newspaper in East London in 1917. We don't know exactly what newspaper it was, but it reads, the heading underneath reads, Chinese seamen who were recently torpedoed attending an open-air meeting in the East End in support of joining the Allies, the flags of those of Great Britain and China. So the flags are those of Great Britain and China. So there's two flags holding of Great Britain and China. And there are many Chinese seafarers, and it's interesting because we've got a memorial, an image on the right, which shows the memorial based in Liverpool, which has many names of Chinese seafarers.
So again, we don't know any names of the men in those pictures, unfortunately.
No, we don't, Georgie. It would be nice to know the names. It'd be nice if someone out there could perhaps maybe seen this, could tell us that, oh, that's my grandfather, or that's my ancestor, or that's my loved one, or something, so we can know who they are. It'd be nice.
And then you found some sketches in the Illustrated London News, I think, that give a little bit more of an idea about the presence of seafarers from Africa and Asia in the docks, I think in the Albert docks in the First World War.
That's right. I came across the image on the left. It shows, it reads the top Hobson Jobson, a curious Hindu celebration at Easter in the East End, and it's actually it's not actually a Hindu celebration, but it's because Hindus also wore turbans, and Sikhs as well as Muslims in India. So it is an assumption that they made to be Hindus, but actually most likely what Georgie pointed out to me as well. She agreed with me, that they are probably Muslim seafarers celebrating the Ashura. The Ashura was a festival that marks the martyrdom of the grandson of Prophet Muhammad, peace upon him, Imam Hussein. And this sketch was published in 1904 in the Illustrated London News, and it is a sketch showing the Indian seafarers carrying out a procession at the Royal Victoria Docks, the Royal Albert Docks in Newham. And the image on the right is the P&O Rome, which again it shows as it was published in 1886. So again, it's quite early, 12 of June 1886, in the Illustrated London News, and it reads the bottom: colonial visitors at the Royal Albert Docks. Malays manning the yards of the P&O steamship Rome, and it shows them at the top wearing the uniform that the Indian seamen would have worn, and it shows them with turbans and hats or something.
So we're just going to shoot on to the last slide now, because I know that we have run out of time because we need to have some discussion with everybody. I know the story is much longer. There's many more people who were included in it, and your grandmother was an absolutely central person to us finding out everything that we've been discussing today. So finally, Asif, would you like to say a little bit about this picture?
Thanks, Georgie. This picture was of my grandfather, which you could see him on the right, and you could see my father next to me on the left. And this picture was taken in 1965 when my grandfather was left Accles and Pollock in Birmingham, and he came to London and stayed with my grandfather for up to 1 to 2 months. And they stayed off 73 Osborne Road in Forest Gate, and my grandfather had this picture made to show my grandmother back home, a picture of my father, how old he is now, because my father had come at a very young age. And it was an image to show her back home, and she never came here to the UK. So it was an image to show her, and my father was about 15 years old. And I won't go into too much detail, but my father grew up and he became the first Pakistani lorry driver, Class 1 lorry driver in the UK. And I think that's about it, Georgie.
It's amazing, and And your grandfather Muhammad Gama, he went back and he died within a year, I think, of this photo, and then the letter that we started off from the beginning was written very soon after that, I think, when your grandmother wrote back to try and get the pension to which she was entitled, and sent some medals.
That's right, Georgie. My grandfather died soon after. He left London we left the UK, should I say, on the 26th of February 1965. He arrived in Karachi, there was no Islamabad airport, so he arrived in Karachi on the 28th of February 1965. And then he had our new home built because they were building the Mangla Dam, and they needed to relocate from the old city of Mirpur to the new city. And during that period, my grandfather laid the foundation stones of the new house. And on the 16th of August 1965, he passed away and never came back, and left my father orphaned at the age of 14, 15 years old. And my father was in the UK by himself, expecting his father to come back, but he never came back.
Thank you, Asif, for sharing all of that with us today. And I really hope that people have been inspired by your searches, the hours and hours that you've put in internet searches and going along to archives as well. Thank you very much for sharing that.
I just wanted to mention that if anyone wants to research on BAME Seafarers, a good book I'd recommend is Asians in Britain, 400 Years of History by the giant scholar Rosina Visram. And it was actually Dr. Guy Bowman who published a book called The Indian Contingent, and he referred to her as a giant scholar on the presence of South Asian presence in the UK.
Asif, we've had loads of people chatting away on chat, which I think have been popping up in front of you while you talk. But perhaps it's a good moment just to run through a few of the comments we've had. Overwhelming gratitude to you for sharing your amazing archive and the story of your grandfather. But some specific comments. So we've got a couple of people who are obviously researching their own families already, so some really good sharing of knowledge around how you might go about researching crew lists at the National Archives. So David, thank you very much for helping there. Barbara Wilson was really keen. She wrote by email to ask Asif how you would find out where a seaman first registered for the merchant as a merchant seaman. How did you do that? Was that something that a part of your research journey?
It was part of my research journey. It's a good question, but for Indian seafarers, for BAME seafarers, I don't think anything will survive in India or Pakistan to say where they registered. But if you find a crew list in the UK at the National Archives, or a crew list in the National Archives in Washington DC, or the Ellis Island records, or perhaps on National Maritime Records, they hold the crew list for maybe just for the year 1915, and they've got some Arab seafarers or even Indian seafarers named on there. So you could probably find, and when you look at these crew lists, it actually shows perhaps, might indicate where they engaged from, and most probably if it was India, they have engaged from India, Bombay, which is now known as Mumbai, or probably Calcutta.
Oh, brilliant, thank you. There was a book that you mentioned that was published by the Institute at the University of Karachi in Pakistan. Would that have been the memoir of that you were talking about? What was the full title of that book? Do you remember?
Yeah, the full title of that book is Chains to Lose, Life and Struggles of a Revolutionary, Memoirs of Dada Ahmed Hyder Khan, and it's edited by Hassan Gardezi, and it's published in Pakistan by the Pakistan Study Centre at the University of Karachi in 2007. It's quite hard to get hold of, but you could probably read the original memoirs of Dada Ahmed Hyder Khan. They were actually published in Urdu, but they were translated into English, and he wrote the book in prison, by the way. So, and the books are probably available at the British Library, but it's hard to get hold of one published in English. But you might be able to get hold of it from Pakistan. I got hold of my copy from Pakistan.
Brilliant. You have to be really determined to get your hands on all of these things. When I first saw your medals, I couldn't believe that you tracked down the actual medal. I thought that you'd found a replica of a similar medal, not the actual one. Someone else has asked, Mark's asked, how unusual would it be for someone in a photo, a seafarer, to actually settle in Newham, having arrived through the ports here? So you were talking about these photographs possibly having people in the audience today who have ancestors. How usual do you think it would be for people 100 years on to be still in Newham?
I think it's I wouldn't rule it. It's a good question, but I wouldn't rule it out because many seafarers, something like I discovered something like 30 or 40 graves, of seafarers of Indian origin, or probably even Somali or Arabs from Aden, Yemen, and they're buried at the West Ham Cemetery in Newham. And could anyone have thought that there would have been Indian seafarers buried there?
Mm-hmm.
So, and the Newham story, which is a good book looking at, it's actually not a book, so it's a booklet published by Newham Council, and it's called The Newham Story, a short history of Newham, and it mentions about how early seafarers, the BAME seafarers, settled as early as 1900 around the dock areas in Custom House, Silvertown, Cane Town. So, do you mind repeating the question? Or
no, that's a really good answer. I mean, it's about the likelihood. I mean, I think that's a really good point, bringing up the Newham story. I think Newham Archives recognises that there's definitely a lot of work to be done in gathering these stories from people who research their ancestry, like you have. There's a question here from Mohammed who would like to know, how would someone like me, an Asian whose grandfather was in the Royal Air Force during World War II, for whom I have no documentary evidence, start to research to know more?
It's a good question. It's a bit like myself when I first started, and then I just had the pension letter which mentioned his name on the medal was inscribed as Muhammad Gama, and I thought Gama, and I thought Muhammad is. So I thought that sounds strange. He would not have spelled his name like that. It doesn't match the spellings on the passport. But you could, if you find out. First step I would really recommend is perhaps speaking to someone, your elders, like if they're grandparents, if you have some grandparents still around, speak to your grandparents or family members who might know the name, and try to find an estimate of an estimated date of birth, probably an age range, or how long they lived to. And the best point for Royal Air Force records would be if it was in the time of the British Empire before 1947. I guess the best point of contact would be the National Archives in Kew for Royal Air Force records, perhaps medal records. You might be they often survive. You might be able to trace them, or records at the British Library. And I know that there's a good person to speak to. Perhaps is David Undertown at in National Archives, or perhaps William Spencer was one I spoke to. I know he's since left the archives, but he was excellent.
Great.
Can I just quickly mention that?
Can I just
a book which just serves as a good research guide.
And just to add, going back to this book that Asif mentioned, Asians in Britain, 400 Years of History, I was just looking, and there's a few page references to Royal Air Force. So if anybody is anybody who's looking for South Asian links to start off their journey, this book is so well referenced in terms of the archives, where any of the information that Rosina has used. So it's both Asif and I would really recommend it as a starting point if you haven't used it already.
I think another source that's good is that George wrote a book called The Invisible Empire, and it's got a whole chapter on a discussion on Indian seafarers, and it's quite a good book. And then she wrote another book called Bordering, which she wrote a kind message in relation to my grandfather, which I'll read out very quickly. It says, "Dear Asif, your grandfather crossed many borders and made the world a better place." So it is a good sources to look into. I've perhaps got that here.
Oh, yeah, that's lovely. On that note, I wonder if there's any other questions just before we start to say goodbye. Please do type them in. Sorry if I've missed anyone. I seem to have gone through. Hope I've gone through everything, but if anyone wants me to ask anything before we go, I want to say a massive thank you to Asif and Georgie. That was a really amazing talk. We managed to fend off the thunderstorms and bad reception, and we managed to get through it. So thank you all so much for joining us as well. We've got a fantastic audience here. We are recording this session, so we'll post it up on our website in a few days under the events area of the website. This is sort of one of our final events for Newham Heritage Month, and just like to thank National Lottery Heritage Fund and London Borough of Newham and Royal Docks for supporting what's been an amazing month of live digital events. bringing together all of the fantastic organisations of Newham, and everyone had originally planned for their events to be in live and in person, so this would have been a guided walk, and I doubt we'd have had 45 people joining us on a guided walk. So I think in a weird way this has worked out so that more people can enjoy this, and hopefully by adding a recording on the website even more people can. Please forward it on to your friends who you think would be interested.
Sorry, Rosie, I just wanted to say thanks to, I could see that perhaps Right Honourable Stephen Timms, MP from my constituency, joined as well. And I know Clifford Prayer from Hong Kong perhaps, and maybe even I got a few friends from Pakistan and India who might have joined as well. So thanks.
Wow. Yeah, and an international audience. We wouldn't have had that on the guided walk probably.
I think it's been amazing. A big thanks to yourself, Rosie, and to Georgie Wemyss as well, and Newham Heritage Month. And
yeah,
you know, it's been, women have empowered me to bring this story out. Really encouraged me.
Yeah. Thank you, Asif. And Georgie, is there anything you'd like to say?
No, I mean, my final thing would just to say that this was a global story when it started in the 1600s with seafarers from all, from South Asia, China, Somalia, etc., on the ships, and then it kind of went quiet when the communication wasn't available, but now it's come back to being a really global story. So when we show some of these pictures, we're not just thinking of people living in Newham. I think Newham needs to really embrace its global reach and global identity with events like this, and I hope that we've been able to contribute to that.
Yeah, absolutely. And yeah, just finally, thank you very much to everyone for coming, and to the National Lottery as well, lottery players, for supporting. It's true. So it's true. It pays for it all. They're big supporters of Heritage, and lovely to see you all. And please turn off your microphones and give Asif and Georgie a little round of applause if they'd love to hear you. And if you feel like turning your camera on just to say goodbye, we'd all be very grateful. Let me see if I can work out how to unmute. Oh, lovely. There's some people.
Oh, lovely to see everybody.
Thank you. Thank you.